From the beginning, the colonists faced many problems, including being handicapped by a weak central government. The Second Continental Congress had no power to levy taxes or to draft men into the army. They got their money either by requesting it from the states on a voluntary basis or by simply printing it. Ultimately, they came to depend largely upon the latter solution, which flooded the market with increasingly worthless currency. Without money, it was terribly difficult to supply the army in the field. In the winter of 1778, for instance, the army was stationed at Valley Forge, only a short way from Philadelphia. There was plenty of food in the surrounding countryside, but the army had no money to buy supplies. Instead, farmers sold their goods to the British, who had plenty of gold and silver. In addition, the army suffered from problems of corruption and inefficiency. The factors that sold or bought the army supplies sometimes cheated and stole, ensuring that they ended up rich, while the soldiers suffered. The lack of money also ensured that the Continental Army was chronically short of basic armaments. Without a professional army, it was very difficult to stand up to the British. The colonists had plenty of part-time soldiers, the state militias, but they were ill-equipped, ill-trained, and ill-disciplined. They were fairly good at Indian-style guerrilla warfare, but in open battle they lacked the training to stand up to British troops. The revolutionaries also faced the problem that this was not just a battle against the British, but also a civil war. It's estimated that 20% or more of the colonists remained loyal to the crown. These people were frequently very badly treated by the rebels. Local revolutionary committees worked to expose these people and keep them under control through terrorism, such as tarring and feathering or confiscation of their property. This cowed some, but many others became determined that the tyranny of the democratic revolution was even worse than the tyranny of the king. As one loyalist commented, quote, "I'd rather have one tyrant 3,000 miles away than 3,000 tyrants 1 mile away." Unquote. Many loyalists actually took up arms to support the British, particularly in some areas of the South, such as Georgia and the Carolinas, and in New York. In some cases, loyalist support came from backcountry areas who were inspired less by their loyalty to the crown than by their resentment of the eastern landlords or planter elites who supported the revolution. The clashes between loyalist and rebel militias were some of the most brutal conflicts of the war. American troops also had to deal with conflicts with Native Americans. Immediately following the French and Indian War, the British had moved to limit conflict with the natives by forbidding colonial settlements west of the Appalachians. When the revolution broke out, many native tribes realized that a British defeat would be disastrous. A significant number of these tribes took up arms to aid the British, or independently took advantage of the war to raid the frontier. Ultimately, the American forces were able to counterattack and virtually destroy these Indian nations, but they paid a heavy price. The frontier was in chaos, even as they were trying to fight the war against the British. Given these disadvantages, how were the American rebels able to win the war? Partially this was the result of the very things that made the British strong. They had a large, professional, well-equipped army, but in order to keep this army in the field, they needed lots of supplies. Most of these had to come through major ports, meaning that if they ventured out into the countryside, they were left with long and expensive supply lines that were vulnerable to rebel raids. The British were able to control the big port cities, but in the countryside they had a much more difficult time. The British had also overestimated the loyalist sympathies of the colonists. Initially, they expected to be able to march into a region and people would immediately revert to their loyalty to the crown. But revolutionary sentiment was deeper than they expected, and the revolution better organized. There was considerable loyalist sympathy, but they were disorganized, while the revolutionaries had spent years setting up a sophisticated organization to spread propaganda and information, and to rally support for their cause. Given these circumstances, the rebellion settled down into a stalemate, with the Americans unable to beat the British army, and the British unable to subdue the countryside or the people.